Hello there, I'm Abbi Merriss from Bluebeard, and I'm going to be doing a really fun, easy, classic recipe of a beef stew today for Indie Maven. Thank you for having me, this is great. So I'm choosing to do this dish because my good friend Annie loves it to death, so I decided why not make her happy and make her some beef stew. So we have a couple simple ingredients, and then there are some ways to change up the classics as we go, and we can talk about that as we go through the making of the dish. So I do have a couple procedures, but we'll just talk through the ingredients real fast, and then we'll start composing the stew. So I have some raw diced or chunked up potatoes. I use Idaho peeled. And I have a chuck roast that I've cleaned and diced up as well. And then we have mirepoix, which is onion, celery, and carrot. That's a very classic component to a beef stew. I'm going to use some red wine to deglaze the pan eventually. Some flour to create the thickness, the bind it all together component of the stew that we all love that cling to our gut. And I'm using this chicken stock today because Amelia's, we're not carrying beef stock currently, so we're going to cheat and use chicken stock. But you can pick this up at Amelia's storefront. And then we have a sachet we're going to make, and we'll talk about that when we get to that point. And then some peas to finish it. And then over here on the board I have, so I like to make my beef stew really kind of spicy. I use a lot of black pepper, and also some special ingredients that I'm not going to tell you today. You have to come to Bluebeard and get it when it's on the menu, and you can try to figure it out. But I will show you a few secret ingredients. So I have some ground or dried garlic and onion powder, sorry. And then, again, lots of black pepper and a lot of red pepper flake. And okay, so I think we're going to get started. So the first thing I like to do, so sometimes people typically will cook the potatoes in the stew, but I tend to do the potatoes separately, so that way I can just braise the beef pretty quickly and then add the potatoes to finish it, so I don't have to lay it on two different components, and that way I just know it's finished. So I'm going to go ahead and put my potatoes in some cold water, and then season it pretty heavily with some salt. And then I'm also using ZESCO's. They provided me today with a whole bunch of pots and pans and some knives. So, beautiful products, which I'm very happy to have because I don't want you guys to see the dirty products. Okay, so I just put the potatoes on. I salted the water, and I'm going to use this other large pot. Just trying to handle it this way. And I'm going to go ahead and get the beef going. So here we are. We're going to, once again, we got the potatoes going, salt the water, and I have my large pot with some oil in it, and you're going to get it nice and warm. You don't want it smoking, but just nice enough so you can start to see the oil start to get thinner almost. So once that happens, I have a little secret that I think is a good flavor builder. So most people will just melt the butter and then that's it. But I like to make it a little brown butter, so it gives it a little depth of flavor into the beef stew. Or to anything that I make, but be careful when you add the butter to the hot oil because it could splatter on it. So I'm adding enough butter to saute the beef in, but then also I'm going to saute the onions here in a second with the beef, and then we're going to add the red wine. And then we're going to add the flour. So this way we get a nice sear and some flavor in the beef. We saute the onions. And then we don't want to add the flour until after the red wine reduces, because otherwise you're going to have just if you add the flour before to make the roux, then you're going to just have red wine. It's not going to be reduced and have that really rich flavor. So I'm going to go ahead and add the beef to the pot. Whoa. I just lied. It is not brown yet, but we'll just pretend it is. So we're going to add the beef to the brown butter. And then I got my wooden spoon here. And then be careful again when you're stirring and whatnot. I would go ahead and get like some nice color on the beef. So I'm using a chuck roll, by the way. I think I mentioned that earlier. And then you just like clean off the big fatty parts and like the sinewy-ness. The sinewy parts would definitely be like the ones that are kind of like, if you don't want to eat it, then don't cook it kind of thing, you know? So I'm gonna add a generous portion of salt. Again, like I said, black pepper is my favorite friend, so I'm gonna add a lot of that. That's not gonna be the end of it. I'm gonna add a lot more of that later. And so 2 different like special ingredients, and I can tell you the rest of them. I already gave you 3. So garlic powder and granulated, or onion powder and granulated garlic. So add that to the beef, and that's just gonna give it a little bit more in-depth taste. And you know, you can do however you want to do. And I don't really like use recipes too much. I like to just go off the cuff. That's just how I am. So I will put a recipe up on the site so that you can follow it, but you know, you can change and modify however you want. So I'm gonna stir that, and then I'm gonna have a glass of wine. Not a whole glass, a sip. So easy. So I mean, 1 pot stew is like the best way to go. So the other thing you can do, like when you're making beef stew, with all these typical ingredients that we're using, you can add miso to it, you can add curry to it, you could do like a yellow curry would be fun, red curry, and then you can add rice to it as well, or over top of it. There's so many different modifications you can do with it. Some people like beef and noodles, so you can do egg noodles, which is really nice. Just depending on your mood, you know, go for it. Okay, so at this point, I got a little color on the beef chunks or the chuck roll. I'm gonna add my onions, my diced onions. I'm gonna let those sweat for just a minute. Just get a slight translucent on them. And then don't forget, while you're doing this, you still have your potatoes cooking on the back, and you don't want to overcook them because you're going to be adding them back into the stew. So they will tend to cook a little bit longer as well. So that's happening. I don't know. What are we talking about? Today's my friend Lauren's birthday. So yeah, Bluebeard, like what we're doing here is just kind of obviously different than everybody else. So Bluebeard and Amelia's, we are, you know, a couple. So Amelia's is doing a lot of online grocery shopping, curbside pickup, and then Bluebeard, we're doing a lot of like take and bake or online ordering, and then patio seating currently until we feel comfortable opening up the rest of the shop. It's been a long, weird time, but I think everyone's getting through it, and it's pretty awesome to see how people can maneuver. All right, let's not talk about that anymore. All right, so now my onions are looking pretty good, and I think Julia Childs once said if you're gonna use cooking wine, make sure you are drinking it as well. So if it's good enough for me, it's good enough for the stew. So then I'm just gonna add just enough to cover the beef a little bit. And I'm gonna go ahead and turn that up because we're gonna let this go pretty quickly. So I'm gonna turn my flame up a little bit higher. And we're gonna let that reduce by half. So if you add a cup, just get it down to about a half cup. And then that way we can start adding everything else. And like I said, we haven't added the flour yet because we wanted that red wine to reduce. Otherwise, it would just taste like red wine and beef. So we're just adding layers of flavor. All right, so movie magic. I'm gonna go ahead and add the flour. All right, so now I'm creating a roux, and the thing when you add flour to your butter and your wine and beef mixture, you want to cook it for about like a minute, minute and a half to kind of get rid of that flour starchy flavor, and constantly stir. And if you need to, turn the flame down so you don't scorch it. My pot's getting, like, see, it's getting kind of thick. It looks like a big vat of peanut butter, which is good. Because then we're gonna add our stock, and it's gonna look great. Okay, so now I'm using this stock. chicken stock, but you can get beef stock. If you can't, I mean, either way it's gonna work because you already created a lot of flavor with the beef. So slowly add the cold stock to the pot and stir while you're doing it. And you're gonna start to see it, like, you know, become thicker and like more stew-like. That looks pretty good for a quick beef stew. Alright, so I'm going to just a touch more because we have a lot of other ingredients to get add to it. So I didn't put the celery or the carrots in quite yet because we need to braise the beef and the stock. And then these other vegetables are going to be, once I do add them, they're going to stew with it and add flavor. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and add, because this has simmered for probably about, we'll just say, you know, about 20 minutes. So we can go ahead and add our carrots. And I would let those cook for about another 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Now we add celery. This is fun. Cooking with magic. I'm gonna be like bewitched. So then yeah, just stir it together, let it hang out. And then while that's cooking and stewing for a little bit, we have this thing that we're gonna make called a sachet, which there's multiple ways of doing this, but I'm gonna use cheesecloth and then like a little bundle of twine, or thyme, and then I have twine and bay leaf. So what you can do is just, so that way you can just pull it out, you don't have to worry about picking all the time. You just kind of roll it all together, and then you take your twine, and then you just tie. I kind of like to rope it together a little bit. That way it doesn't fall out. And then you just make a generous knot. And then I would leave a piece of long twine hanging out so it's easier to pull out, so you don't have to like grab the actual sachet. So now you have this, and then just throw it in there. So you're gonna let that simmer all together for probably about another, well, it depends on how much you're making. So this is probably gonna take maybe a half hour to an hour, 45 minutes, just until everything's tender. That's as far as you wanna go. With that sachet though, then you can just pull it out, and then you don't have to worry about like picking out the bay leaves. But if you do put the bay leaves in by itself, it's always good to like have it in there, because when you plate it up, if somebody gets a bay leaf, then that's good luck. At least I'm very superstitious, so that's what that is. And then also at this point, I'm gonna re-season. So I'm gonna add more black pepper, very generous amount, a little more salt. And then don't forget your potatoes are boiling. So I'm gonna take these off because they are next to done. All right, so now I strained my potatoes, and my beef stew, sans, potatoes, and peas have not been added because I wanted to let that simmer for about an hour until everything was nice and tender, like I said before. So because if you add the potatoes too early, they're just gonna turn into mush and they're gonna disappear. So the stew is like ready to go. The meat is nice and tender. You can taste it lots of times, and make sure you're drinking wine while you're doing it. So add your potatoes. I love peas. So and obviously seasonal, so like frozen peas work just as well as like, you know, fresh peas out of the garden. And then just add a shit ton of peas. And then stir it all together. And then when you're ready to serve it, take the sachet out. Sachet. Sorry. And then lo and behold, we have this stew here. Absolutely delicious. And again, I'm using all these like great ZESCO products. And I'm using a spork today. Why not spork it, you know? Whenever you're ready to serve, what I typically like to do is make sure you strain out enough of the liquid so you get plenty of the goulash. Oh look, there's a bay leaf. I'm lucky today. Or maybe my friend is having a birthday. Maybe she'll eat this. So a lot of that. Not a little more. So good. It smells delightful. And then I have this very large pepper grater. Do a lot of pepper on top. And then I'm going to even add some fine ground pepper. Really get the sense it's going. And then I did some sliced scallions. And then I have a sport. And then just some buttered baguette would be great. Like buttered bread and beef stew to me is like the pinnacle of like my childhood. So it's like eating chili with a peanut butter sandwich. You know, it's like you gotta do it. Man, that knife is sharp. So yeah, just slather on that butter. Raw as it can be. It's just gonna melt into beef stew. I'm getting so excited. Okay, and then here you have it. Here's my beef stew that my friend Annie loves so much. Thanks again for having me, Indie Maven, and hope to do it again soon.